Kevin De Bruyne's Manchester City career is nothing short of legendary. He scored 108 goals and delivered 168 assists in 422 appearances across all competitions, won 19 trophies with the club, just including those 6 Premier League titles and 1 Champions League title, not to mention getting the treble as well. De Bruyne was also a 2-time Premier League Player of the Season and now holds the record of the most assists in the Premier League history with 119. Lahoud, looking at all those stats, I mean, to return to the Etihad Stadium, which he will be doing when he plays for Napoli tomorrow, he must be, it's an incredible feeling for him.
Yeah, as a player, I've had the opportunity to experience that in my career. There's 2 things that go on. You're looking for that first step on the pitch. It's this feeling of returning back home. That first applause, and you were saying the anticipation of the reception he's going to receive. He is Manchester City's greatest ever player. The stats prove it. The reception that Pep Guardiola, that embrace that he's going to get. City's fans, they know when they have a true legend in their midst, and he's a City legend, a living legend. Then comes the after effect. When you get in the locker room, you take off your shirt, you look down, and you see the badge that doesn't say Manchester City. He is motivated to prove a point, to go on and put an absolute show. And I remember that feeling of experiencing the feel-good vibes, of saying, okay, I want to be respected and honored for what I did here, that I made a point, I made an impact in this club, in this community, in this league, but I'm not done yet. And Kevin De Bruyne will be highly motivated.
For De Bruyne going to the stadium, and I wonder if he'll go on autopilot, start walking towards the home locker room, and just the things that he's done for so long and becoming such a hero at this club. It's going to be mixed emotions. It's probably going to feel weird. Like you said, Lou, looking down, and you're not going to be wearing City blue. You're going to be wearing a different shade of blue, not on that day, but Napoli, same color pattern there. So with De Bruyne, it's a little bit, I'm not sad, but in reporting out his situation this summer, sources told me while the Chicago Fire and Napoli were the teams pushing for him, and a couple others had some conversations, he made it very, very clear. I want to stay at Manchester City. I want to stay at Manchester City. They told him they didn't want him. It was time to move on. So like you said, Lahoud, it's a big, big day for Kevin De Bruyne with a big point to prove, and he's going to be motivated.
Maybe a little bit of seller's remorse from Pep Guardiola in Manchester City, because their midfield has not been the best so far to start the season. What he needs to do, because he's going to be a huge applause. There's going to be a massive ovation for him when he steps onto the pitch. He's going to be emotional, without a doubt. All he needs to do is just look over at the other bench and look at Pep Guardiola. And that motivation will come back. And scream to Pep, let me talk! Let me talk! Yeah, exactly. Do that all over again. But you know, that's as much motivation as you need. And if you're Manchester City and you see him on the other side, a motivated Kevin De Bruyne who feels good about his team, scored at the weekend as well. Yeah, I'd be scared if I'm a Manchester City fan that he could come in there and make it very difficult for Manchester City to find a result at home opening the Champions League.
You mentioned kind of how Manchester City are adapting in the midfield, not going too great for them. No. When you look at their players, how do you think they're doing in trying to replace Kevin De Bruyne?
Not great. I mean, I think that Manchester City, and I think this is kind of a bigger, larger conversation that maybe we don't have a ton of time for, but I do believe that they've really messed up some of these transfers in the last several years. Doku and Foden comes into the team after not playing all season, comes in, he does score a goal, but he hasn't been able to even make the 11 for quite some time. Oscar Bob has been starting at the wings. Doku has been starting at the wings. Reinders is supposed to be the kind of replacement for Kevin De Bruyne. He's not on that level. He's a good player, but he's not on that level. And I do think that this Manchester City team is kind of in a little bit of a transition period where they don't have the attacking options that they once had behind Haaland. And from the midfield is concerned, obviously Rodri being there is massive and he dictates play. But I do feel like they haven't replaced De Bruyne, and they really haven't replaced players that at some other points in the club have been leaders from the wing positions. I mean, the one that really does stick out to me as far as getting sales wrong, Cole Palmer. Do you think that Cole Palmer would be, that Pep Guardiola would love to have Cole Palmer right now in this team with the struggles that they've had?
Well, hindsight's always 20/20. You didn't see this coming with Cole Palmer, but I want to highlight one player. This is a massive, massive match for Phil Foden. A massive, massive match for Phil Foden. Yes, to come off the Manchester derby and get a goal. You saw him more confident. When Kevin De Bruyne was there, a lot of people in the British media and a lot of people who know the game picked him to be the heir apparent to Kevin De Bruyne. So this is a potential statement platform for Phil Foden to say, I'm not just back in the Manchester Derby, he could be back in a very difficult match, but you're going to have spaces to play. I think it's going to be a trap game for City. I wouldn't be surprised if Napoli go to Manchester and actually win this.
Okay, everyone, it is time for our Zillow new home search. Lahoud, you're going to go to the wall and tell us how Kevin De Bruyne has been doing in his new home at Napoli.
When we look at the different positions that De Bruyne is taking up, I mean, looking at where he used to play for City, it's higher up the field, and now for Napoli, he's dropping back to receive the ball and play make a bit more.
I do think that being in Serie A does give him a little bit more freedom. I think that run you just showed where he kind of basically goes around about 4 defenders. I don't know if he could still do that in the Premier League at this phase, but I mean the brilliance is there and the motivation going into a match, going back to Manchester to play that. You're going to see some of these moves. He's going to attempt to kind of beat some of those midfielders off the dribble. And this lineup, I mean, it's the best team in Serie A. I don't think there's any doubt. And Conte has set this team up to compete on all fronts. And I think the biggest thing we saw, 3 of the new signings this past weekend, all score goals, and they win 3-1, including KDB and Højlund, who I think is going to have a complete resurrection at Napoli. What do you think about this lineup as far as facing off against Manchester City? Anguissa has been fantastic. We know what McTominay's done, going back to Manchester as well. What do you think of this 11?
I'm excited to see how Napoli really impose their physicality. They're a more physical team than Manchester City, and I think they're going to try and kick them and beat them up and really put the fear of God in them at home. When I watched the Manchester Derby, there was about a 10 to 15 minute period, let's say 10-minute period, where United were getting stuck in on Rodri. And Rodri is still trying to find his feet, Stefano. So if I'm Stanislav Lobotka, you're positioning on cutting off passing lanes. You don't want to be caught over here. You don't want to be caught over here. You want to be that anchor in the middle of the park. And then 2 players, not just Rasmus Højlund, Scott McTominay, yes, listed as a wide player, but you know, in transition, his work rate defensively is going to create spaces and opportunities for City, who do commit both fullbacks really high. Go back to the Brighton match where it was cavalier at times, something that we haven't seen City really do. But now that they have true fullbacks, I think of players like a Nico Riley, who was good in the Manchester Derby, this could be a moment that he gets exposed. And Matteo Politano is one of the probably most underrated players in Serie A in terms of consistency and just his servitude to the Napoli badge. He's been outstanding for the last probably 3 seasons.
Yeah, without a doubt. And we already know about the quality that McTominay has, the Scottish Maradona, as I called him last year. KDB, we know it as well. But you mentioned Politano and Anguissa. They are so good and so clutch for this team in the way that they build up their attack that I don't think Lobotka even needs to worry about really going forward. Like you said, he needs to just kind of sit back and wait and not really be pushing forward because they have enough to be able to set up Højlund, to be set up Tomine and Kevin De Bruyne. This is a very dangerous team. And you know, after the last time they won Scudetto a couple of seasons ago, they did not really build that team up, and they were not good in the Champions League and not good in Serie A. They built this team up now the way Conte wants, and that's why he stayed. Now I truly believe this is a team that can compete on all fronts, which was, to think of a Napoli side competing in the Champions League, it's big.
Yeah, I said it before. This Napoli side can go to the Etihad and not just get a draw. I think they can get all 3 points. I wouldn't be surprised if they go, shock everyone, and get the result.